CalMatters. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan newsroom based in Sacramento, and we're committed to explaining California policy and politics and how it affects you and
going and where they could seek help for all that. So today, this Q&A is focused on doing just that, finding out what the state of California is doing to keep its companies afloat during the shutdown period and make sure they're ready to open for business again when we're given the all clear. Your CalMatters host today is reporter Laurel Rosenhall, and she'll be talking with two people working on brand new efforts being rolled out by the California Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, better known as GO-Biz for short. Speaking of a flood of reader questions coming in, send us yours during this conversation. Just type them into the chat box on the right-hand side of the YouTube screen, and Laura will add your questions to hers. And before I turn it over to her, I just want to list a few ways you can keep track of our reporting and our events like these. You can sign up for our daily newsletter called What Matters. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel right here and to our podcast hub at SoundCloud to watch and listen to these live Q&As, even when they are finished. And consider becoming a CalMatters member or donor to help us keep doing our nonprofit, nonpartisan journalism, especially now when it really, really matters. All the information needed to do that is on our website at calmatters.org. And with that, I'm going to turn the mic over to Laurel.
Thanks, Vanessa, and welcome everyone. Anyone who's here participating in this conversation probably already knows that small businesses are taking a huge hit from this pandemic. A recent national survey showed 3/4 of small businesses are experiencing negative impacts. Some businesses have had to completely shut their doors. Those that are open are grappling with lower sales, supply chain disruptions, sick employees. So today we're going to be talking about the resources available, both from the state and federal governments, to help small business owners weather this situation. And with us are two experts from the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. We have Isabel Guzman, the Director of the Office of the Small Business Advocate, and Dilawar Syed, Chair of the Entrepreneurial Task Force. And his day job is as CEO of Lumiata, a healthcare analytics startup. So to begin with, I'd like you each, Isabel and then Dilawar, to please briefly explain what GO-Biz is. I think a lot of people aren't familiar with this office. And then tell us very briefly about your role.
Yes, thank you so much. Today we're going to be talking about GO-Biz is basically the economic development agency of the state of California, and it's focused really on attracting, retaining, and growing businesses in California. My office is an independent office within it, the Office of the Small Business Advocate, and we focus specifically on providing information and resources to small businesses, advocating on behalf across state governments and the private sector, and building resilience. And so truly to that final point, we've been working diligently to ensure that businesses across California have the most up-to-date information and have access and connection to the resources during this coronavirus, as we know that they've been impacted. We know that a lot of this information is changing every day. It's dynamic. It's hard to digest. And even now, as we're talking, they're looking at rolling out additional funding at the federal level. So staying in tune with that information is really critical. That's why we've been posting regularly on business.ca.gov, the state's official coronavirus site, covid19.ca.gov, to make sure that businesses have the latest information that they can access. In addition, if you go to our coronavirus site at business.ca.gov, you can sign up for our newsletter, which is updated weekly with information and guidance that has been issued. So I encourage you to do so because the situation is fluid. We know as well that especially it's hard to navigate. So I will run through some recent announcements that I'd like to share with you and see where the state and the federal programs as well as local programs can support you. But it's important to know that it is hard to navigate. We encourage you to reach out to us, but more importantly, our centers, the state funds and network of centers, 80 centers providing direct advisory services and trainings on a regular basis, and they've stepped up to respond in this coronavirus situation to make sure that businesses are supported. So through our centers, you can access free consulting and training, and they're available at business.ca.gov/centers. These are federally contracted centers, so they're also in touch with what the federal programs
Centers providing direct advisory services and training on a regular basis stepped up to respond in this coronavirus situation to make sure that businesses
as part of the CARES Act and federal stimulus. The state has, though, been focusing on financial and tax relief.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Isabel. Would it be possible for you to raise up your mic a little bit? I'm hearing that it's hard for some people to hear you.
Apologies. I've been having difficulty with this this week, so hopefully this is better.
Yeah, this is better. Yeah, if you're closer, that's better. Thank you.
Yes. So what I want, hopefully everyone heard that information is clear, and I'm sure it'll come up as well in questions, because it's really ensuring that you're connected at business.ca.gov/centers to those center networks. The additional thing that we're trying to do, though, is really engage in extensive outreach and public engagement. And that's why I've asked Dilawar Syed to join us. He's the chair of our Entrepreneurship Task Force, and the Entrepreneurship Task Force was launched really as a bridge to small businesses and entrepreneurs to provide that connection and engage with leaders like him who have had successful businesses, scaled operations, or successful small businesses. And we wanted to make sure that they were engaged with the state, providing advice, as well as working with us hand in hand and making sure that small businesses had the information that they need. So I'm so excited that he's here today as well. Before I pass it on to him, I just wanted a few things that the governor announced last Thursday, and this was all in anticipation of the federal resources that exist and were started the Paycheck Protection Program.
Yeah, Isabel, if you don't mind, that is actually my first question right after Dilawar introduces himself. So if you don't mind, I'd like to have him introduce himself, and then we'll kind of go through what the feds are doing, and then what the state, and then you can talk about what the state is doing, if you don't mind. Thank you. Okay, great.
Well, thank you everyone for having me, Laura and Vanessa. Thanks, and Isabel, thanks for the setup there. I head up the Entrepreneurship Task Force, as Isabel mentioned, and this is a role where we are trying to bridge, if you will, what's happening in the private sector, what's happening in the entrepreneurial community, in the small business community. My day job is I'm a CEO of a company. I can tell you, as I speak, we are looking at ourselves applying for the payroll protection program, and I'm living, if you will, both the opportunity and the challenges that are part of the process. And that's precisely why we created this task force, first time in the history of the state, where we as private sector CEOs are advising the governor's office by virtually sharing what we are every day dealing with challenges, right, and also the opportunities in business and in our startups and in our business communities. So as broader effort, if you will, of the Entrepreneurship Task Force, we do a number of engagement initiatives, including town halls and listening sessions on access to capital, access to resources, access to networks. And in particular, as the COVID-19 pandemic hit us and hit our state, we've been driving engagement with the small, medium business community. So starting 2 weeks ago, we started rapid response virtual sessions. So every second Friday, our task force members and some folks in the community get together, and we dial in with, quite frankly, hundreds of people like yourself who are right now listening and watching. The first session we had 240 entrepreneurs and small medium business owners, join us from all over the state. And this was a topic about access to capital. Especially, we were actually having the session right after when Congress passed the CARES Act. We have a second session coming up on this Friday. So we'll share with you more information. So I see my role as, if you will, an ambassador, right, for lack of a better term, for small, medium business owners or entrepreneurs like myself. And again, look forward to having the dialogue as we go forward in the hour.
Great, thank you so much. So I'm going to run through quickly the programs that the federal government announced last week, and then ask you, Isabel, to kind of talk about what's available at the state level. So there's at least 3 different ways small businesses can get help from the federal government right now. And those include the Paycheck Protection Plan that you mentioned, which offers up to 2.5 months worth of payroll for businesses that keep their staffing up at pre-virus levels. There's the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Advance through SBA, which is a $10,000 advance on a standard SBA disaster loan. And then there are the bridge loans up to $25,000 in rapid loans for those who already have an SBA relationship. That's a real brief, high-level overview, but I wanted to ask you, Isabel, if you could please tell everyone what are the additional resources that the state of California is offering to assist small businesses? And in particular, who's it for? Is it for people who can't get the federal loans or the federal assistance? And how should people go about applying if they do want to take advantage of these opportunities?
Yes, thank you so much. We definitely want the businesses to take advantage of the federal stimulus programs. There are some great programs in that. The Paycheck Protection Program is a forgivable program. So obviously we want California businesses to take advantage of that. With the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, you can get a $10,000 advance, which is grant, which you can get regardless of whether or not you're finally approved for the loan, and which you get to keep. So I think there's some great benefits that we don't want to circumvent with any state programs whatsoever. Our state effort, though, is to ensure that small business, one, have access to capital quickly through immediate financial and tax relief, as well as some programs that can serve those who are not served by the federal programs. And so starting off with more of that, bridge or financial relief, last week that the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration was implementing basically a loan program against the sales tax collections that the small businesses would have to pay directly to the state and local. And so that program was implemented, in effect, a 12-month zero interest delay of your sales tax. And so for especially the hard-hit industries, the retail, the restaurants, that was immediate relief to hold them off, at least until they could apply for some of these federal programs. In addition, recognizing that not all businesses are either eligible or will qualify for some of these SBA programs at the federal level, the governor also announced a $50 million recapitalization of the Small Business Finance Center's Small Business Disaster Relief Loan Program. It's a guaranteed program that the state offers, and our focus is on providing small dollar loans, $50,000 and under, to those low wealth communities, eligible communities such as undocumented immigrant entrepreneurs who have businesses here who may not qualify depending on the guidelines at SBA. That program was instituted through an existing network of financial development corporations in the state. So we are rolling that out now and hope that that's a good safety net for those who are not able to access those federal loans.
Okay, so that seems like an important point to clarify, that the state programs are available to undocumented residents, business owners in California?
Correct. At the federal level, there are very specific guidelines, either citizenship or legal status, with certain requirements in terms of the number of years and term of requirements. So to fill that need here at this.
And what about cannabis businesses? We did get an audience member asking about that. I imagine they probably can't get federal assistance. Can they qualify for state assistance?
Correct. I will clarify that there is SBA did issue some information on the certain ones that are eligible if it's not for specific purposes. I apologize, I don't have all the details on it, but I can share it with you for your viewers and try to look it up in the meantime. But the our program does not exclude cannabis businesses, but it's important to note that a lot of lenders are not able to access those programs because they're federally regulated as well.
Right.
So it's not a viable option at this point. We're continuing to explore improve access to capital to all California businesses, though.
So for people who want to apply for this state assistance, what should they do?
So they should reach out to our Ibank. Ibank is the California infrastructure bank that houses the Small Business Finance Center. It is another independent office within GO-Biz. Own website, we point as well, but it's ibank.ca.gov. And on there, they already have the information available on the COVID-19 Disaster Relief Loan Guarantee Program, so that you can review the steps and how to apply and see some actual lenders who are currently active in the community. So that includes Small Business CDC, Pacific Community Ventures, as well as First Northern Bank of Dixon. And basically those are the direct lenders that you would go into. They then partner with the financial development corporations that Ibank distributes these funds through as guarantees.
Okay, great. And that website, one more time, it was what?
IBANK, bank.ca.gov.
Great. We'll make sure to get that in our comments so people can see that. So we got many questions from audience members who are self-employed or independent contractors, people who do not have any employees. And they're wondering both if they can themselves qualify for unemployment, and also if they do get unemployment, can they, in addition, get government loans to cover business overhead expenses that they may continue to incur while they can't work. Are there any particular resources that self-employed people should be aware of right now?
Yes, and I would encourage all those self-employed or independent contractors to visit the edd.ca.gov website, because to explore specifically what benefits are available to them. In addition, just as a business owner as well, you can access the SB loans. You are eligible for them. The application period on the Paycheck Protection program to Friday, and it's more about accessing your talking to your lender so you can make sure that you access those programs as they're available. So you are able to get that as well. More just on the other expense side, so not the payroll side, which covers your own payroll. There is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, which you can apply for as well.
Okay, great.
In addition, I will add that the state programs are also eligible. Any business-related expenses are eligible, so you could pursue at Ibank as well. Okay.
So the federal program that rolled out on Friday has been pretty chaotic. I'm sure you guys have been reading a lot of the same news stories that businesses are not getting the details that they want, and that the website's crashing, and banks can't handle the flood of applications. Wells Fargo already blew through its money in just a couple days. So two questions on that, and maybe you can divide them amongst yourself as you see fit. But number one, what is GO-Biz doing to ensure that these kind of problems don't happen with your offerings at the state level? And two, is there anything that your department can do to help small businesses apply for these federal loans, or otherwise navigate this process that a lot of them are telling us is kind of really difficult?
Yeah, I'll jump in first. I mean, and it's partly why we thought launching the Entrepreneurship Task Force regular engagement was so important, really, because to walk through this very stressful, ever-changing environment with individuals who know how it feels and be able to relate those concerns and questions. I will add before passing on to Dilawar that it was that with all these programs and navigating it, we have existing systems in place at Ibank, and this was an established program. And our financial development corporations and the community development financial institutions that partner with them are preparing to serve this population based on the focus areas that we've identified. So our whole team is working hard to make sure that on both fronts that there's liquidity, that these guarantees are being accessed by these lenders locally to serve these communities. And I think that the other thing is is really just staying engaged with your local business organizations, your advisors, et cetera, and tapping into the resources that the task force is trying to roll out, as well as our office, is key to making sure you have access.
So yeah, I would agree, and I'm living through this experience right now. So for Lumiata, Silicon Valley Bank is a lender, right? And we want to apply for the payroll protection plan. I think it's a terrific program, and they were supposed to start accepting applications yesterday, and they couldn't make that happen. And now it's supposed to be today, and it's right now 1:23 p.m. Pacific, and no news of when that's happening while we are ready to go. But what I'm finding through this process is, which I would really encourage our listeners and viewers, is that government is one actor, state government is another actor, but our ecosystem is another huge actor. I am quite actually, frankly heartened to see, like in the Bay Area, for example, how many people in the broader stakeholder community have stepped up. So, there are law firms that are conducting webinars. There are, investors that are passing on information. And of course, I'm speaking perhaps, more from the lens of a startup, but even in the non-startup community, there are these organizations, local nonprofit community and so forth, that I would recommend people to lean in with, right? To your local associations, exactly what CalMatters is doing as an example. So I last night was Googling some information on this, and I was amazed to see the number of webinars that showed up just from me typing in PPP eligibility rules for startup. At least a dozen different organizations in our state have actually done very detailed, and you didn't have to even sign in your name. It was publicly available information. So I think there is a lot of interest in these programs, and obviously they are coming at a critical time. There's also a lot of information publicly available. And as this information is evolving, I would highly encourage everybody to seek out that information through the internet, through social media. I, for example, tweeted last night about this, what I found some eligibility rules issue with respect to startups. You can follow me at Dilawar, Dilawar. And I know that our GO-Biz, office also regularly shares information. So, look, the reality is the scale of this effort, is such that there will be challenges, right? That's expected. But I do think there are more resources in our communities, and businesses of all types can seek out those resources. And we'll make sure from the Entrepreneurship Task Force and from GO-Biz that we are regularly putting out those resources out. And our bi-weekly sessions that we are doing every second Friday will also outline all the different resources people can tune into. Great,
thank you so much. We have a question from Jeff Sondheim, who's asking if it's possible to. He's saying, some people say that if you apply for the economic injury disaster loan, you cannot obtain the PPP loan and vice versa. Is this accurate? Do we know if if it's either or is it possible to get both?
My understanding from the guidance that has been put out to date, and I know that it's ever changing, so I would definitely encourage you to talk to your lender or call SBA. But my understanding is that you can apply for the economic injury disaster loan for those expenses like your rent, et cetera. You can access that $10,000 advance grant. And then in addition, apply for PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program. What will not be allowed is for you to then have that $10,000 given as forgivable loans on the PPP as well. So in other words, you only access that free $10,000 once. So if you do get a PPP, a Paycheck Protection Program loan, and you get a portion forgivable, they will deduct that $10,000 you took as an advance, and that is of that conflict, and so you can apply for both. Same with the state. There's no credit elsewhere requirement that limits you from taking a state or a local bridge loan type program to hold you over until you get that SBA funding. So you can apply for them. And I will just add on, there are lots of other local programs we've been advocating within the Community Development Financial Institution Network to get disaster loans through these nonprofit lenders. And so definitely, as Dilawar said, search and your local community nonprofit lenders to see what they can offer to you.
Okay, great. So speaking of nonprofits, someone named Stephanie echoed a question we had received from some of our other audience members yesterday, which is what assistance is available for nonprofit organizations in California? Some of them are having a hard time getting the federal help. They might not have pre-existing relationships with the Small Business Administration. So is there anything that the state is going to do or can do specifically to help nonprofits?
So yes, the federal programs are nonprofits are eligible for them, and so they're very specific. It's the 501c3s and 501. I think it's C19 for veterans or tribal organizations. At the state level, nonprofits are eligible for our loan program through Ibank Small Business Relief Program, and so you can apply for all of those. To do so and look out for those resources.
Some business owners are wondering how to manage the cost of their property during this crisis, whether that's rent, mortgage, or property taxes. Is there one specific resource where people can go to find out whether they can defer payments, whether depending on their situation, whether it's rent, mortgage, or property taxes?
There's not a comprehensive website that would list all the mortgage holders. There's a couple things here. The state did take action to help protect both residential and commercial on evictions, but it's a local issue, so you should check with city or county to see what protections they have in place on both the residential side and any have home-based businesses, or on the commercial side. So start there with your local city and county. Update guidance on this front at covid19.ca.gov. So whenever the governor issues any announcements or guidance, I would encourage you to check there for more details, including on this program. I know that in addition, the governor had announced financial relief and partnered with 4 of the 5 large banks, as well as 200 other state-regulated entities to ensure that there would be mortgage relief for 90 days. And so, I think that as that list is ever changing, I would encourage contact your lender and see if they can make accommodations. I will note that all SBA loans were given you could have an opportunity to access 6 months of no payments on all your SBA loans. That was an additional set aside in the CARES Act of $17 billion. And so if you had a current SBA loan, you could ask for that and with the SBA. So I would do the same with each of your individual mortgage holders.
Great, thank you. Leslie asks, I'm unable to apply for the PPP as all the lenders will only accept applications from their own customers, but my credit union does not do SBA loans. What do you recommend?
I think this will continue to change over time as the guidelines get more specific, as the the Treasury and the SBA collaborate to figure out how they can create more incentives for this program with banks through secondary markets where they can resell these loans after to the federal government. So I think you should continue to track with your current banks. There are and credit unions are available. All federally regulated could automatically apply to participate in this program. So I think you'll the coming days more and more activity and signups on this front. Also, 7A lenders at the SBA front for participating in this program also include community, which are nonprofit. So those CDFIs I keep on referencing, the community development financial institutions, also can give out these Paycheck Protection Program loans. So there are alternatives to banks, credit unions, and nonprofit lenders that you can explore.
Lauren, can I jump in on this as an idea to your I'm sure I forgot the name of the person who asked the question. I think and I can say this because I'm a private citizen. I would use the opportunity to also give feedback. Write to your congresswoman or congressman, write to your senators, and say, this is what's going on. So I'll give you an example. On the startup side, there were some really challenges with respect to eligibility because you're backed by venture capitalists. And somehow there was this this notion that because a VC is an investor, we are part of the VC. We are not part of the VC. So my investor has 300 different companies. We're all small businesses, right? We're all 30, 40, 50 people each startup. And the community advocated very aggressively. We wrote to our senators, we wrote to congressmen and women. And so you should give feedback. The fact of the matter is the scale of this economic disaster is so high and so big that it's going to be some time before we recover from it. And so these things can be improved. So we are not powerless. As citizens, we can reach out to our folks and say, look, here are some challenges, right? And we know, having a sticker, if you will, on the bill is one thing, but rolling out money and making sure it's available is a whole different ballgame. And it's on us collectively as a community that we advocate for each other and for ourselves and reach out to our lawmakers so that they can improve this process. And I'm pretty sure that if we do that, there will be improvements that will happen. And we already are seeing that, there's been things that have been defined just over the last few days. So just a recommendation as something that I do pretty aggressively as well in my private sector role.
One thing, if I could add briefly, I forgot to mention that SBA did put up this weekend a lender search tool. So if you go to sba.gov, the Paycheck Protection, it'll be front and center, find a lender. So you can find banks, credit unions, and nonprofit lenders that are participating.
Well, I like Dilawar's suggestion because we are all about getting people civically engaged at CalMatters. So that's the name of the game for us. Before the pandemic, there were several new-ish laws in California that many businesses saw as problematic. There's AB 5, which limits the use of independent contractors. The Consumer Privacy Act, which requires giving customers a way to opt out of having their data sold. And of course, the ongoing minimum wage increases that phase in gradually every year. Expect the governor to make any changes on these laws, either through executive order or by working with the legislature?
I could not speak to that specifically, just to say that I know that we're continuing to look at all ways that businesses and the business environment is impacted. And I know that there are multiple teams evaluating on multiple fronts. And so I'm sure that you'll continue to track and see what evolves, but I don't have any specific comment. Okay.
Marlene is asking, what is the expected turnaround time once someone has applied for the advanced $10,000 disaster loan? Do you have any insights on that?
The advanced grant, they said that it would be quickly, that it was within 3 days of successful completion. I don't even know exactly what that means. They haven't provided guidance, and I understand that it's taking a little bit longer. So that would definitely be an SBA question.
When you guys look at the sort of landscape of businesses in California, are there certain sectors or kinds of businesses or regions that you're most concerned about in terms of the long-term sort of permanent injury that could happen from this pandemic? If we were to gradually work our way back to normal eventually, how many businesses or what kinds of businesses might be back and might not be back a year from now, say?
It's such an unprecedented situation. It's hard to rely on past FEMA data in terms of that type of history. So, we're just monitoring the situation on an ongoing basis to see what that economic impact was going to be. Hopefully some of this federal stimulus package, as well as what the state is doing, will prevent that or situate businesses better so that they can reopen quickly and scale back up. So I don't have a good answer yet on that full economic impact picture, but we're studying it and continuing to track it.
And if I could chime in here, look, I mean, there is some anecdotal evidence, right? We all as consumers, citizens, are seeing the impact this is having on Main Street, right? On restaurants, right? There is a figure like, very significant number of restaurants in San Francisco city alone that would probably never come back. And it's heartbreaking. And I think the reality is there will be some companies that will unfortunately may have a very hard time weathering the storm, and whether it's small businesses or startups. But I would say there is also an opportunity for us to step back and see, could we pivot through this time, right? So we're actually having an exactly that conversation this coming Friday in our second rapid response session, where we will bring a couple of folks who've actually, gone through this period and are thinking about how do we pivot. I'll give you my example. Our company is in the healthcare and AI space. We do analytics, and we've been thinking very hard about how do we become part of the solution around COVID-19, management and its impact on the health system. So I think that's a question almost every business owner needs to ask herself and himself and say, look, at this time, what are some of the strategies that I could employ that will make me not only weather this, but perhaps even come out stronger? And look, there are many stories like that we have seen that have happened from the last financial crisis. I don't know if people know this. Chobani was founded around 2008, 2009, financial crash, and actually got an SBA disaster loan, the Chobani yogurt that many of us enjoy every single day. And just in a matter of a decade, where the company is that took an old plant, got an SBA loan, and was able to make something out of this. So I think, again, not to say that everybody can necessarily pivot, but it is definitely an opportunity to think about how do we meet the moment, if you will, right? So happy to talk about this more on this Friday, in our next virtual session that we're having with a few entrepreneurs.
And if people want to participate in those virtual sessions, are they open to anyone who wants to join, and how could they do that?
Yes, they can actually. And we have, if they go to our business.ca.gov/ETF for Entrepreneurship Task Force, ETF, there is information that we're uploading. I think the link might be there. If not, it'll be there within a couple hours for them to directly register for this Friday's session. Past recordings are available as well, and Spanish, so that available for everyone. The other thing that I would say is that, we have some incredible entrepreneurs with success stories even on Main Street. I mean, we're featuring one person on Friday's call who owns a bakery, and they pivoted from half restaurant, half grocery store business and teamed with a local farmer to try to go direct to consumer because they couldn't go to the restaurants anymore. And so I think you're finding, and I think that's what's beautiful about small business. They're innovative, they adapt. Need to support that and celebrate that as well.
Dilawar, I wanted to ask you about the small business grants that we recently heard about from Facebook. They just announced that they're giving $100 million in grants and loans to small and medium businesses, with 15% of them designated for Bay Area companies. Do you know if GO-Biz is working with private sector companies that have a lot of money that are doing grants like that? Is there more philanthropy that private companies could be doing or to support small businesses?
So let me address the second part of the question. I think the private sector companies could always be doing more. And some of them are stepping in with in-kind. Even a company like myself, we're doing our bit by hosting a global hackathon to build for COVID-19, hacks to hopefully come up with some solutions in this pandemic. So there should be more, and there is quite a bit of movement, if you will, in the Valley right now to do our bit. Now, in terms of what is the role of GO-Biz in encouraging companies or how they're working with Facebook, I'll let Isabel respond to that because you will be up to speed on that front.
Yeah, I mean, I do take the role as advocate seriously, and I did mention that was both private sector as well as state. I have been collaborating with a lot of philanthropy as well as corporate social responsibility folks, and trying to help them better understand the impact they can have by supporting small businesses during this. I think I mentioned statewide disaster that the nonprofit sector is doing, the CDFI market, and so directing there and trying to be that voice for our CDFI networks who are doing this, this lending and this capital, and oftentimes it's a mixture of loan grants where they're giving cash infusion or buying down interest rates or for payments, and so that philanthropy to ensure that that these small dollar are able to continue to access capital is really critical. So we have been working in that space broadly across the administration. We've been partnering with private philanthropy. I know that we've had multiple announcements, including one of our Entrepreneurship Task Force members Wise Industries did launch a tool to connect dislocated workers with those who are have jobs available, and so we'll continue to see partnerships with the private sector, including entrepreneurial, small business, private sectors.
Great. We've got a couple more questions coming in. There continue to be more questions about unemployment. Both is unemployment available to people who are self-employed, as well as can people get the different types of state and federal assistance if they're also getting unemployment insurance. I know you addressed that earlier, but some people may have tuned in later. Do you mind real quickly just repeating that? Because it is a question that's come in many, many times.
Yes, I know that the state and federal government are collaborating on this new CARES Act funding for unemployment. And so the latest guidance is available at edd.ca.gov as they update it in real time, because they're going live through this process. So I don't have details. I do know this, though, and the Secretary Sue has tweeted this out as well. If you're in a contractor or self-employed, because I think you don't self-determine that you're not eligible to EDD and explore that. Correct. I don't. In terms of the state programs, there's no duplication of benefits. If you still need funding to keep your business going, then those loans can be available. So I would just continue to explore both fronts.
Okay. And another question that's come in that may repeat something we touched on earlier, but it is important, is this question about whether these California Ibank programs only apply to businesses that are not eligible under SBA, or can people apply for both?
It's for those who are not qualified. So and okay. Understand that they're all distributed through community development financial institutions, and so they are certified as community development financial institutions because they serve low income, underserved populations. So the vetting happens, there in terms of, they know who can go for SBA and who would qualify, who would not. So I think that's, that's important to consider. It's not to replace the federal programs.
Okay, great. And for the audience who are watching us, I just want to give you your kind of last opportunity to type in your question if you have any questions for our experts. We will be wrapping up at 2:00 or before then if people have all the answers they need. I wanted to ask kind of a big picture question beyond the grants and loans, just sort of thinking down the line and the need to get our economy going again eventually. What else will it take to get these sort of shuttered sectors of our economy open up and moving again? Is the government, planning for that, or are you still sort of in an emergency mode of just planning for the next, couple weeks ahead? Are you thinking many months down the line of how we get things going? And a related sort of specific question that one of our audience members asked about has to do with reassurance to protect business owners from liability if there is a COVID outbreak after their business reopens. This person owns a gym and was just saying, physical distancing not possible. What can be done to help protect on the liability in that? So that's sort of a specific follow-up as well as a big picture sort of thinking down the line.
I can start just that from a big picture perspective. Yes, the state is evaluating what we can continue to do, not only during response but also recovery. That means not only engaging now on what is being put through the CARES Act and what can help us for this rebuild, but also just long-term continued federal programs that might emerge for the nation, and then evaluating that as well, and what the state's role is and can be within that. And I think a big part of it as well is tapping, to meet this moment and tapping our amazing, innovative an ecosystem that we have in the state to, as well as small businesses who are working hard to adapt and will want to rebuild. And so really focusing on how we can partner with small businesses, have discussions like the Entrepreneurship Task Force's facility, and to hear ideas state to make sure that we're working hard on that portion as well.
Do you have
that specific answer? The liability question with the insurance, I know we're tracking all of that carefully. I don't have an answer at this time, but it has been flagged, so I appreciate that. Okay, great. Do you guys have any estimate on when we might be opening up our economy again, either partially or fully? I often, what I refer back to is really, I think it's on all of us. I mean, we're not over this at this point. Being serious about staying at home and being prudent with all the different guidance in terms of protecting, their communities and their families, from coronavirus is really going to determine that timeline. And so it's a continued challenge. And I know small businesses are leaders in their communities. And so, leading by example and being that rock for their communities is really important.
And Laura, if I may jump in there and wearing my entrepreneur hat, look, I mean, regardless of when we open, and hopefully it's soon, and hopefully, we can overcome this, pandemic and be back in business. But the reality is, our world is going to change. I don't think anyone should think that we're going back to normal. Just like other broad disasters, change a lot of things. This pandemic has changed our world probably forever until we have, a vaccine that is widely available and you've seen generations being vaccinated. So I would actually encourage all our viewers and listeners and business owners is don't just think about the next 3 to 6 months. Think about the next phase of your business as we are post-COVID, as an economy, as a state, because there may be other bouts of pandemics. By the way, there could be another pathogen that may come a few days later. Hopefully we become smarter from this experience and say, how do we become more resilient? What are the things that we have to do when you hit through this area or you see a challenge like that? How do you overcome that? And there's some good that's going to come out of this. For example, being able to work virtually, right? Like all of us are making this happen. I think, just like, other tragedies sometimes made us better in some respect. There's all sorts of good that's also happening. So I would look at also just past timeline, how do I prepare myself in this new reality that we might face for some time, even if you don't have a shutdown.
Thank you. That's kind of an inspiring way that's sort of making it, I guess, a silver lining out of a difficult situation. So our last question is a pretty specific follow-up to the nonprofit question we had earlier. And Elizabeth wants to know specifically if 501c6 or 501c4 organizations are eligible for the state grants.
Typically, no. It would have to be that they have an operating business, more like a 501c3.
Okay, great. Well, I want to thank everyone for participating, and I'm going to hand it back to Vanessa to do our final wrap.
Thank you, Laurel, and thank you very much, Isabel and Dilawar, for joining us today. If you have more questions for the GO-Biz team, email them to us at info@calmatters.org, and we'll make sure they're passed along to GO-Biz. And again, if you miss any of this discussion, you can watch it again or listen to it later. I know we're going to have a transcript as well. The video will be available here on the YouTube website we have, as well as on our website, calmatters.org. We're creating audio podcasts of all our conversations, and they are available for download at calmatters.org as well, and also on our podcast hub at soundcloud.com/calmatters. We're doing regular reporting on coronavirus in California. So for all our coverage on that, visit calmatters.org/coronavirus and subscribe to our newsletters at calmatters.org/subscribe. And again, if you're able to support our nonprofit, nonpartisan journalism at this time, please make a donation via our homepage at calmatters.org. That's the hub. That's where you can also stay tuned for our upcoming Getting Through Coronavirus Explained events. The next one coming up is this Thursday, 1 p.m. It's about mental health. I feel like all of us are taking a very particular focus on that these days. We'll be talking with California mental experts about strategies and about tips on how to take care of our mental health and get through this pandemic in a good, healthy state of mind. In the meantime, please stay strong, healthy, and safe. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you here next time. Thanks again.
Thank you.